For more stories like these, go to www.social-tv.co.za, subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on our social mediums.
"82% of alcohol sanitizers are non-compliant." Research done by accredited laboratory SkyCorp in KZN has shown that 9 out of 11 hand sanitizers are non-compliant, that they in actual fact don't carry the 70% alcohol content that they claim on the label. We have a chat to Bert Rodriguez, who is CEO of Biodex, who along with their partners conducted this research. This is another episode of your social newscast with me, Sam Marshall, brought to you by www.social-tv.co.za. Your research, which kind of blew my mind, was that 82% of current sanitizers being used is non-compliant. That means that's almost 9 out of 11 hand sanitizers that we get at stores and entrance of malls, shops are non-compliant.
That's right. And of course, the reason for that is the regulatory platforms in countries that comply to the ISO standard is that every country has its own standard compliance mechanisms. And in South Africa, we have them too. It's the NRCS and it's the South African Bureau of Standards. The South African Bureau of Standards is not compulsory, but the NRCS is compulsory. And over the last, 15 years or so, people have not necessarily complied to regulation. And they went ahead selling products into the market that were not tested, that were not verified, and that were not certified by the South African regulatory institutions. And of course, when the need came about with the coronavirus and the market started looking for certainty in the products that they were buying, they started finding that there aren't that many companies that provide registered products. So needless to say, if you haven't over the years been a disinfectant manufacturer and you haven't been complying to the South African laws, you would have not registered. And of course, you might ask, how did people sell product? Well, they sold it because the buyer is not equipped to deal with what is specification material and what is not specification material. So it became a bit of do as you please, and the regulator was not enforcing it into the marketplace. So you are now left with very few companies that are actually prepared to supply the user with a registered and compliant disinfectant.
But what you're saying to me is that a lot of these companies, in whichever form, they're breaking the law, because by law, your disinfectant needs to have a 70% alcohol base. Now, you're saying that it's either a case of the buyer doesn't know or hasn't been informed, but at the same time, these individuals, people's companies are selling these sanitizers to ordinary people who think that they are protected.
Yes, Sam, you're quite right. So the manufacturer is breaking the law immediately by not complying to the country's regulatory platforms. So disinfectant in South Africa, it is not left to the manufacturer to decide whether he wants to register or not. It's law. You must register it. So the manufacturer is already breaking the law by not registering the product. And then further downstream, the buyer, if they have not been trained in purchasing products that comply to a standard, and he has not been forced to pay attention to those intricacies by his company policy, and if he has been allowed to purchase the material without registration over years, when it now appeared that there was a massive need for people to find stability and to find comfort in the brand they're buying, they are not aware of it. So who should be held liable? And as they say, everything's fun and games until someone gets killed. And that is precisely what's going on here, is that everything's been fun and games until the need is in place. Legally, a user of a product can hold a manufacturer accountable for not delivering on the label's claims. And we saw that in KZN, where a manufacturer supplied a product to a school that was not registered, not compliant, no test certification, and you landed up getting 200 kids infected in a space of a week, and a whole lot of teachers as well. So where does the blame lie with this? Is it the regulatory bodies, or is it the manufacturer, or is it the consumer? So it becomes defaulted to the law, which says you are not allowed to do this. And I suppose those claims may come up in future, or people may not bring it up and say you falsely supplied me a product. But there is certainly a legal case to be made against the owners and the managers and the chief executive officers of these companies to be responsible.
But sanitizers, Bert, have become such a critical and almost must-have in life at the moment. As a person who's part of a family, there's checks, and one of the check is sanitizer. Check, I've got it. It's in my bag. I've got one in the car. Every time you climb in your car, you disinfect your hands. Every time you leave a shop, a venue, it's really close by. Now, if you're saying to me that 82% of these sanitizers are non-compliant, it means all of our lives are in danger.
Absolutely correct. So if you leave a shop or enter a shop and you don't have your own sanitizer, which is of course what we recommend, Biodex recommends that preferably buy your own sanitizers, that you can take the time to investigate that it is real and it will perform according to the label. However, should you not have your own sanitizer and you enter a shop and the person that is spraying your hands with a sanitizer is not purchasing a product that is guaranteed to kill the virus, they are creating a sense of security for the users. And the user then feels that he is protected because sanitizer has been applied to his hands, and yet he is not protected. So what do we suggest? We suggest Biodex as a company suggests that you purchase a registered and regulated hand sanitizer so that you are not under false illusion of protection against infection. And I'm not only talking about viruses, I'm talking about bacteria and everything else. It is now only that it is in the forefront of our lives that we pay so much attention to it. So sanitizers have become absolute must-have, as you mentioned, Sam, but rather purchase your own and check out the label. See that it's got a registration that is holding the label accountable for its claims.
But obviously I agree with everything you've said so far, but seeing that sanitizers over the last 5 months have jumped onto our critical list, and going forward for the foreseeable future, educate us quickly. What are we looking for when you're saying check to make sure that it's registered? Is it a particular code? Is there a logo of an organization? What should be on the label to make sure that you are dealing with a product that in actual fact is a certified product and actually does do the job it claims?
Yes, there are a couple of things you need to look out for. So if you are using a alcohol-based sanitizer, that is a South African Bureau registered product, and of course you can look out for the South African Bureau of Standards logo on the label to start off with. If you are buying a water-based hand sanitizer, of course, Sam, the split between the two different sanitizers is one hand sanitizer will contain alcohol, which must have a minimum, according to the World Health Organization, of 65% alcohol. In South Africa, we are further to say we'd like to have a minimum of 70% alcohol. And the other hand sanitizer that you can use would be a water-based hand sanitizer. And that water-based sanitizer would have to comply to an NRCS registration. And the NRCS registration is compulsory in South Africa for any product that says it is a disinfectant. So whether it is a surface disinfectant or whether it is a hand disinfectant, it must comply. To not only comply, it must be registered as well, according to the NRCS. That must definitely be on it. And of course, if you're using an alcohol-based sanitizer, then it must have a South African national standards, preferably the logo on it, so the person can identify it without too much complications. And there should be a number attached to it. In addition to this, in South Africa, we also have SAPA, which says any product that is used in the medical industry must be registered with SAPA. So you got three different registrations in South Africa that will indicate to you on the label that you are buying a product that will perform according to your requirements of disinfection, or you are running the risk of not getting the effective disinfection you expect because you didn't have the registration on the labels. So critical. Either find a SAPA registration number if you're going to be using it in the medical field, or find a South African registration number, or find a NRCS registration number. And of course, preferably all of them.
Do you know how many illegal businesses are currently operating in this space? I can only imagine that the opportunists overnight saw, here's a massive opportunity to make money, set up shop, and started trading as if they're a legal entity.
Sam, I can't tell you how many illegals there are, but I can tell you how many legals there are. According to the South African Bureau of Standards, if you log on to their website right now, there are 24 registered companies that can supply you registered and approved hand sanitizers. So that should give you an idea of how many illegal companies are out there. I don't know the number of registered companies in Gauteng, for example, alone, but I would think just plucking a number out of the blue, you could easily have between 6,000 and 10,000 registered chemical companies or industrial chemical companies that would make these kind of products in Gauteng alone. But if the South African Bureau of Standards is claiming on their website that you only have 24 registered companies, that should allow you to do your own math.
Sure, that's shocking. But
it's very shocking.
But thank you very much for your time and enlightening us to this, to this research that Biodex recently concluded.
Yeah, it is. Look, Sam, I appreciate the time that I have with you to clarify and discuss these issues. Of course, if I look at Biodex, we are a government-funded company. We have been since 2005. And one thing that one of our funding agencies is the Technology Innovation Agency. And of course, we use taxpayer dollars and rands to make this happen. But they have always, and they still are, very, very serious about all the company's good governance issues. And good governance means if you make a chemical compound or a biological disinfectant like Biodex does, it must be registered. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a long time. It costs a lot of money. And most companies will just not comply because there's no one telling them to, and including the client who doesn't request the company to comply. So, of course, it's a subject that, like you've mentioned, in the last 4 months, it's become front and center as a subject. Disinfection, hand sanitization has become a very serious safety aspect of our lives. And I really appreciate that we get a little bit of time to debate this. There are thorny issues, and we have a lot of problems with it because I know the money we've invested to do all the test work, to get all the registrations done, to have the South African Bureau of Standards come to audit us twice a year. You have to employ a person just to regulate your South African Bureau of Standards relationship. And I feel that companies that have taken this serious are now in a position to be able to talk a little bit about it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sam.